Hi, everyone. This is Albert Shin of the Pop Out. And if you made it this far, that tells me that, for one, you are not completely turned off by my personality, but two, you're finding at least some of the information here or some of the discussions here useful, aside from maybe my tirade Tuesdays. Uh, I do have a sincere request of everyone who's listening. That is that I ask that you do some things to support this particular podcast. And I want to first give you the reason for it, and then make the request. So, ideally, one of the reasons I started this podcast is I wanted to get in contact with students who actually needed assistance. One of the things that's hardest in the private sector of education is the connecting up of the student to the right instructor, right? It's hard to kind of know the right people to draw the right sort of connections so that students get paired up with the people that could help them the best for what they need help with. And I started this podcast in part because I didn't know where to find these students. I've gotten students handed to me essentially through word of mouth, right? Like people that I've worked with, people who trust me, have said, "Hey, I found a student. They're going through some things, and I think you could be of real help to them." And then they'll send them over my way. But I wanted to just do something a little bit more proactive to try to reach out to see if there's anybody that I vibe with where I can be of some use in helping them in their journey. So, you know, if since that was the goal of this podcast, my hope was that this podcast spreads as much as possible to students, to parents, to fellow educators who needs a space to talk to somebody about whatever it is that they're having to work through. Just have someone to bounce ideas or thoughts off of. Um, and so, I really would like there to be enough people so that we could actually start doing some live streams where I can just go directly to the people who need assistance and provide my honest feedback, or to get them connected with the right resources so that they get the help they need if it's something that I cannot provide, right? I hope that at least I could direct them in the right to the right places. So, with all that said, what I would like from the listeners who actually do enjoy this podcast, and only if you actually enjoy it and you find this to be useful, um, is for you to like, subscribe, share, find ways to kind of just spread the word. And specifically, I would prefer to be, I know that this podcast is on a lot of different platforms, but I prefer that you try to find us on YouTube. And the reason for that is just more logistics, right? I just wanted one place where I could handle the live streams, but also make sure that the rest of the community kind of was there. And I've played around with different platforms, and I have a preference for YouTube, just for the comment section where people could just directly ask questions. I could take a look into and prepare responses to them. But also because the live streaming is just going to be a little bit smoother, they just have the resources to handle larger groups. So if you do enjoy it and you want to find ways to support us, um, please like, share, subscribe on YouTube. Additionally, and this is only if you have the resources, I would ask that you find ways to donate. I put the information on all the different platforms of the different what methods of payment, like Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, whatever's preferable to you. Um, but creating these podcasts do take time, and as you can see, the sound quality is not necessarily the greatest. This is a one-man operation, and I know nothing about anything that I'm doing. This is all first time, including making the intro music. What is it? Doing the audio editing. Like, I've never done that before, so this is all just new to me. And I know that some of the sound sounds muddy and it doesn't sound as crisp and professional. That's because I'm not a professional, I'm a complete amateur. So, ideally it would be nice if I could hire one of my former students or current students who are well versed in these areas to help out with some sound editing. To help improve the experience for the listeners, but also, especially as there more and more people start to come on with their comments and feedback, that I could hope to have somebody here that will help out with the compiling of all the different requests, and then we could also do some more research on assisting people in the ways that is needed. But all of this takes time and resources, and it's time and resources that I individually do not have. As you know, I have a day job, a full-time job. So this is just something more on the side to do. And so if you could find ways to support this channel, this podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. But I've always wanted this podcast to be something where I ensure that everybody has access to the same thing. So I'm not going to create any special memberships or perks. I think everybody should be deserving of the same information. So if you believe in the mission, if you believe in what we're trying to do here, and you want to support us monetarily, we greatly appreciate it. It will remain on anonymous. I'm not here to kind of shout out people's names, though it is greatly appreciated. But I will keep it anonymous. We'll send you direct thank you notes separately, and we'll make sure to use those resources you send over to good use, including improving the podcast experience here. I really do. I'm hoping that we could get some guests on at some point. I do know some people who I think would be great additions to our conversation. So there's a lot of great things coming up. But again, how much I do and how quickly I do it will depend heavily on the support from you, the listeners. So yeah, most importantly, please like, subscribe, turn on the notifications so that you get notice of when we're going to do these live streams. I'll also try to give you ample opportunity by making the announcements ahead of time, and I hope that you join in, and then we create this community where we could really be a resource for one another. Now for the next show. Welcome, everybody, to the Pop Out. I'm your host, Albert Shin, and I am here to talk about personal statements, part two. This is going to be a discussion of how to actually write one of these personal statements. Now, last time I talked to you a little bit about what the purpose of a personal statement is, right? And I was trying to break some of the myths that exist around personal statements. And you'll notice this about me, that I tend to focus less on the exactly what you talk about and focus more on the purpose behind what you're talking about, right? And last time I tried to explain to you that personal statements are not necessarily about showing off how wonderful you are. I mean, it should show yourself in a positive light, but the purpose of a personal statement is really to contextualize everything in your application and to fill in gaps, to be informative of the details that are missing in the rest of your application, right? And so what I'm going to talk about today in terms of exactly how to write a personal statement, this is a particular style of writing and a type of writing with a very particular purpose that it'll be helpful for you to get better at, not just for college applications, but especially for those of you who are trying to, go into professional and graduate schools later on. You're going to be asked to write a personal statement at some point again. And even those of you who are just going to go straight into the workforce and want to be able to present yourself in a way that clearly demonstrates the right kind of fit with wherever it is you're applying to, knowing how to write a personal statement can be extremely helpful. Okay. All right. So what exactly is the approach to personal statements, and how is it different than other kinds of writing? Well, the name says it all. It's a personal statement. You're gonna have to get personal, okay? So, which means that you need to have a good sense of who you are. This is gonna be the starting point, okay? I cannot tell you the number of times I have met students who look great on paper. They are very intelligent. They know how to write. They have, really honed their skills in writing, in the work that they do, and receiving a bunch of accolades. They're just like on paper, they just look great. And then I'm trying to help them with their personal statement. I look at their personal statement and I'm like, okay, this is trash. Well, I don't say it necessarily like that, but it's clearly not a high quality personal statement. And then so I have to kind of start from the bottom up to figure out, what is this student about? What makes them tick? what drives them, what motivates them, where is this coming from, right? And I would work with them, and months and months of working on it and editing, and they're frustrated and I'm frustrated because there's not very much progress. And part of the reason there's not a lot of progress is that there's not a sense of self-awareness that allows them to tap into their own life experiences to be able to properly explain who they are, right? Talking personally in this way is a skill set that needs to be developed. And by the time you get to college applications, it's going to be too late for you to really develop it. This doesn't happen overnight. This is something that you develop after years and years of really kind of reflecting on your experiences, which means that if you really want to write a good personal statement, the place to actually start is really thinking about who you are, figuring out your identity, figuring out what makes you tick, right? There's a lot of different ways to do this, right? I mean, children do it at an early age by doing, writing diaries. Some people, I know, I have friends who have journaled well into their adult years as just a good exercise for slowing down and reflecting on life, right? And especially in this climate in education, students are so busy doing a lot of things without really considering the meaning behind what they're doing, right? Like, what are they actually getting out of the experience that is deeply moving and meaningful for them? If you're too busy just doing stuff, you're not really taking the time to appreciate what it is that you're doing. And so you're not going to have a good sense of why you're doing what you're doing because it's not connecting to anything about you in any way. Instead, it's just stuff you're doing, right? Kind of like mindless activities that we might do, right? It might show up on the resume as you've done a bunch of stuff, but there's nothing particularly special or revealing about those activities, revealing at least in the sense of revealing about you as a person. Okay. So if you want to write a better personal statement, the first place to start has nothing to do with writing. It actually has to do with you getting to know yourself. Right. So last time I suggested an exercise where you kind of go through your life experiences and really track the things that were most meaningful for you, the things that would stick out in your memory, the things that are, ever present when you think back on your life, right? I was suggesting that a lot of these moments probably have impacted you in some sort of way. There's a reason that these memories stick. It's because it touched something in you, some core aspect of you, or it was important for shaping your identity or shaping your interests or whatever it might be. Okay. So that's one exercise that you can do. Like I said, you could do journaling if you'd like. But my personal favorite, and this is something that I've been doing for over a decade now, is getting therapy. Right. Now, I know there's still a bit of stigma, although over the last few decades, that stigma has kind of diminished a bit. But I think there's a lot of ideas going around therapy, thinking that, oh, I need to have suffered through something horrible or have a mental illness to go seek a therapist, to seek a psychologist and get, go to these sessions. That's actually not at all what these sessions are, or at least need to be, right? Yeah, in some cases, somebody might be suffering from severe depression and then so need to go seek a therapist. Sometimes it could be an underlying, neurological or physiological issue, in which case you might seek a psychiatrist because you might need medication of some sort, okay? Um, but other times, the therapists are there to help improve the way that you navigate life by better understanding your emotions, your responses to stimuli, to situations, and it gives you a better sense of control and agency over yourself. That's really what ideally it should lead you to do. Now, I will say this from the beginning that this is a luxury. This is absolutely a luxury because therapy in the United States is extremely expensive. It is actually difficult to find a good therapist. Um, there are a lot of good therapists, but sometimes it's a matter of fit, right? Some therapists you can trust because of your own personal experiences. You find it easier to trust than others, or some therapists you feel like their approach kind of fits in with your worldviews, and so you find that you click with a particular therapist. There's a lot of trial and error that happens, right? But I think that it's an extremely helpful experience in part because in the sessions, if you really want to make it worthwhile, you're forced to confront your true self, right? Your truest, most authentic self. And that's not necessarily the prettiest picture, right? It could reveal that you get jealous and are petty sometimes, or you are insecure about something or another, right? Like it could reveal things that you don't necessarily like about yourself. Okay, but here's the thing: if you do not take the time to address those, now, then it's not as if it's going to go away. It's just going to manifest itself in other ways as you grow older. And in fact, as you grow older, it probably gets worse. If anything, you spend too much time trying to cover up your insecurities, for instance. This is how you breed narcissists, right? This is where narcissists come from. It's rooted in this deep-seated insecurity that they're trying to constantly cover up by putting down others or puffing themselves up, right? So, look, what I'm saying is the following, right? Whatever method you use, whether it's conversing with others, with professional or friends or family, or doing some journaling, or like I said, to each their own, right? You find a way that you feel comfortable with, that you find, you know, uh, a way that you can challenge yourself to dig deeper into who you are, but also at the same time with people that you can trust, so you're not in an unsafe position emotionally, especially. um, you know, just find the time and make it a priority to do some of this work, right? Which means it's going to take time away from doing a bunch of stuff, right? It's going to require you to slow down and just be attentive, maybe, to the things that you're doing or why you're doing it. Okay. It's going to mean that you're going to have to be more selective with things like extracurricular activities or what you do with your free time, hobbies, that you are going to be a little bit more mindful in what it is that you pick and choose to spend your time on. um, this is all a product of you kind of slowing down and focusing on yourself, focusing on what it is that you really want, what is it that you're doing because other people have told you you should do it, and other things that you are doing just to do it, like mindlessly, thoughtlessly, just doing it just because, right? And so this is where it's going to start. If you have trouble with this area, your personal statements will always feel lacking, right? It'll always feel lacking. I have found that the students that have written the best personal statements are not necessarily the best writers. They're students who have spent time reflecting and have come to kind of accept and understand themselves, both their strength and their limitations, right? They know what they like, they know what they don't like, they know what they want to do, they know what they don't want to do. Or if they don't know what they want to do, they know at least some of the things about themselves, so that they have an understanding of what direction would make the most sense, right? We often learn a lot of this from in the context of relationships, right? This includes relationship with parents, which sometimes could be, contentious. Other times it could be a source of great support. With friends who sometimes might call us out. I will say this: you have good friends if you have friends who will call you out for your bullshit, and will force you to look in the mirror and accept some ugly sides of you. Those are good friends. Okay, friends who just pump you up, and those are not real friends. Friends will challenge you because they care, right? Like if you care about a friend, you will make sure that they don't move in a direction that is harmful to themselves, right? So friends could be a good source of resource in this, a good big help in this area. Whatever method you use, like I said, you need to start taking time to really get a good grasp of who you are. Okay. So all these suggestions are just, some of many. Whatever you find works for you, please, I would say start doing it. Ideally, I mean, you can't do it at a too early of an age. Just human brain develops at a certain rate, and just, physiologically, I just know that it's probably going to be starting in high school at some point, where you can do a lot more deeper reflection on yourself, on your identity, right? One other exercise that I thought was interesting that actually helped me a lot was talking um, to older family members, right? So older cousins, uncles, aunts, grandparents, if they're available, right? Having conversations about family history, learning about, where you come from. That's been super helpful. But you could also learn it by talking to people in your community, because if you grew up in one area for a really long time, knowing, right, what other people in that community are seeing could help you make better sense of your own experience, because there might be some points of intersection between your experiences and theirs. And so they might give you the words or a way to kind of explain your experience in ways that others might not have been able to. Okay, so get to know yourself. That's the first thing. Okay, second thing, when you're writing your personal statement, the first thing that needs to come out is the fact giving. You need to make a list of all the things that are not in your application that is a central part of who you are. So once you got a good sense of who you are, right, you want to make sure that that comes out on the paper, right? And how do you let that come out on the paper? Well, strategically speaking, and now we're doing a little strategy here in terms of what we choose to put in. You'll want to pick things that are not present, or at least not really clear in other parts of your application. Okay? Does it make sense? So, like, if you are somebody who really cares about stand up comedy, let's say, and then you've even done some stand up comedy on your own time just for fun, okay? Like, you're really big about it, okay? There might be something on your application somewhere that says, like, yeah, I've done a couple of gigs of stand-up comedy, right? But if that's like a real deep intimate passion of yours, and it's like something that you're not only proud of, but it's like a core part of your identity, right? You need to mark that down. Like, that needs to come out somewhere in one of these many essays. We'll talk about this. There's a lot of different prompts, and it's going to come out in any one of them. And so you want to add it to your list of things like, I really want this to be something that I talk about, because it's genuinely a key part of who you are, right? If you are, I don't know, like, huge on sports, or if you're huge on, like, there's one particular activity that shows up on your application, but it doesn't really exemplify, right? Let's say it just shows that you did 4 years of some activity. It doesn't really show the extent of your passion for it, right? Like, the personal statement would be a place where you could bring it in, right? The actual what you talk about won't matter all that much. What matters here in this first stage is making sure that you pick out as many of the things that you think would be helpful for completing the picture of who you are. All right. We're filling in the gaps. That's the first thing we're doing. We're filling in the gaps. Okay. And it's important to do this because, look, we're all humans. The people who are reading your personal statement are humans, and humans connect to other humans when they sound like a human, right? But resumes and these applications by design don't present a human being at all. What they present is a list of accomplishments, a list of, interest, a list of accolades. Like, it doesn't present an actual person, right? It doesn't feel like the reader is going to be, is the reader isn't necessarily seeing a real person in front of them. The personal statement is one of the few places where you can actually present yourself as a real person. And what constitutes a real person? Well, a person is made up of experiences. It's made up of, memories and feelings and all of these other things that cannot be expressed in other parts of the application. So it's going to be important for you to make sure that you fill in the gap by presenting all of the things about yourself that make you who you are, make you a human being, right? So when you get advice for things like, don't list down your, accomplishments and so on, there's a couple of reasons that you shouldn't do it. It's not because, like, your accomplishments are like trash and that's just like you shouldn't be talking about it, or it sounds like you're bragging. I mean, those could be concerns, but that's not the primary reason. The primary reason you don't want to list your accomplishments is, A, you sound not like a person again, right? And B, it's going to bore the shit out of the reader. It's going to bore the reader because it's not going to sound like a person, right? Look, if I'm having conversation with a robot that gives me robotic responses, I'm going to lose interest pretty quickly, right? If I'm going to have a real conversation with somebody, I'm going to want to do it with another person who has their own perspective, their own set of experiences, their own thoughts, and they're bringing something to the table, right? That's what's going to make the conversation more engaging, right? So think of it like having a conversation with somebody. You're going to be bored if somebody just talks at you with a bunch of, facts about themselves. Okay. If you've ever been on a date like that, oh my goodness, this is the worst kind of date where somebody just talks about themselves and all the things that they've done, right? So they're talking about themselves, but in a way where it just sounds so, you're not a real person. You're just a resume. That's what it feels like. I'm talking to a list of stuff, right? You need to present yourself as a real person. To do that, you need to fill those gaps so that those accomplishments turn into a rather a story, right? That's really what you're presenting. You're telling a story of a real person who has had experiences, who has interests, who has desires, who is passionate about something, who has, stuff that they value, right? Who has opinions about things, right? Like that's a real person, right? You need to present yourself as such. Once you don't, that's when you lose the audience. That's when the reader starts to get bored, they start falling asleep. You got to understand, right? These readers are going through like, hundreds of thousands of essays, right? It's exhausting. Like I could tell you as an instructor, right? When I have to grade a paper with the same topic, right? And I have to grade like 100 of them, I lose interest after every like five, six, just because I'm so exhausted from reading one essay after another that's talking about more or less the same kind of stuff, right? Like it could drain you. The essays that will spark interest and give me life again are ones that actually sound real, right? Where especially for a personal statement, where a student is actually bearing, right, being vulnerable and exposing themselves as a real person, right? That's when you start hearing a real story. That's when it's like, okay, I am interested not because there's anything particularly special about this person, but because they're actually talking to me like I'm a fellow human being, right? So the goal is to make yourself into a real person in these essays, and the way to do that is first by filling in those gaps so that it's not just a resume that you're giving to them, right? Where you're adding all this information that is what constitutes a person, right? Your feelings behind why you did what you did. Okay. This is why I always tell students, right? Like you might feel like you haven't gone through any special experience, but I keep on stressing to them, like, look, you don't need to go through anything like, amazing or traumatic or unique to have something interesting to write in a personal statement. You just need to talk about your own life. You just need to talk about yourself, right? So once you got a good sense of knowing yourself, so if we're doing it step by step, right? Once you got a good sense of knowing yourself, then you should have a good idea when you're looking at your application, right? Like what is missing in these resume that doesn't, like, when you're looking at your own resume, you're like, it doesn't really explain me as a person, right? So what would that be? What would the stories be that would help explain why I'm the kind of person that I am? Or, what can I explain about my family background or my community or whatever, fill in the details here, right? What is it that would make this turn into a real story, a narrative about a person who has real desires, real goals? Um, and once you hit those personal notes, that's when the reader will maintain their interest throughout the essay. They don't have a lot of time to read your essay. So you really need the first, like, few sentences to already tell the reader, hey, I'm not just going to be talking in this robotic way. I'm going to be talking like a real person. Okay. Which means, and this goes to my third point, right? When you first write your first draft of your essays, okay, what you need to do is speak like a teenager. Like you need to speak like you are an actual, like, don't try to impress them with flowery language. This is not the space for it. Personal statements is not the space to show how eloquent of a writer you are. Now, there is one exception, which is if you're super into writing, right? Especially creative writing, and you want to showcase it because that's just kind of like how you are, right? Then fine, go for a concept where you present that because that's really reflective of who you really are, right? But I think a lot of students try to, again, it's kind of like this faking themselves, right? Like they're acting like they are smarter or more intelligent or more college ready. They try to present themselves in a certain light, and that's not the primary goal of a personal statement. So you need to cut that shit out, right? You need to focus on actually talking to this person like they're a fellow person, right? So I always tell students it's actually helpful to start off by speaking in your everyday conversational voice, right? Write as if you're having a conversation with a friend, right? So imagine that your friend asked you those questions that are on the, college admission essays, right? You say like, hey, so why do you want to do, what do you want to accomplish in college, right? Like just talk to a friend about it, right? This is where a lot of the information is going to kind of come out, right? And be honest here, right? So one of your goals for college might just simply be, hey, I want to meet more people because I'm super interested in meeting people. I've lived in a small community and I just really haven't gotten mean to people that are too different from everybody in my community, just more or less seems similar to me. Or, you might have the desire to go to a different city and this is your opportunity for it. You've never been outside of your area. Just to share some personal stories, like I remember when I was writing my personal statement, right? Uh, I wrote about how much I wanted to get out of my neighborhood. I just hated living in the Inland Empire. Other people like my brother, I remember had a great experience. He had friends. He still goes back there. He has friends there. But for me, it was a time of severe depression. It was really hard. Not that I was talking about anything particularly uniquely challenging, necessarily, but I talked honestly about how one of the motivations to go to LA was I wanted to get out of the kind of environment I was in. There was something about the situation where I felt like it was taking some of the energy out of me, right? Whether it was the weather, the hot, hot desert summer weather, whether it was the people, whether it was something about the environment, like being around people who, um, at least in my immediate circle, right, weren't necessarily very motivated, right? How it sucked a lot of energy out of me. I noticed that, and I wanted to go to a place that would energize me. And I felt like a big city would be helpful for it, being exposed to people who are busy and, ambitious and wanting to do stuff, right? Like that brought me a lot of excitement, right? And the other reason was I wanted to leave home and be away from my parents for my own personal reasons. But again, we're going to talk about how we want to be careful about exactly how we present ourselves in these essays. But the key here is this, right? As you have those conversations, not all of it, like especially in the first few drafts, not all of it is going to come out in the final draft. So you don't have to worry about whether or not it's appropriate. You just need to be honest, right? And then you need to write in a way that's true to yourself, right? So write as you speak, the way that you speak, right? Make it feel like they're talking to a real person because, well, if you are just speaking how you normally speak, then it should come off that way, right? That's the place to start. Again, I'm not saying that this is the final draft, so stop getting anxious about whether what you're saying is right or wrong or appropriate or any of these things, right? Just be honest for in the first draft, okay? The editing process will help you kind of hone it. It will help you, pick and choose and how to present yourself and all that. That's the editing process. But if you self-edit, like if you censor yourself in the first phase, then you're going to produce garbage because it's already not really you, right? And the readers are going to feel it. Students don't realize, like, if you develop as a writer and develop reading skills and you've read enough of different types of writings and different personal statements, you start developing an eye for when somebody is being authentic or not. Like the writing itself feels different, and this is one of the places it starts, right? The writing does not feel authentic if you try to present yourself in a certain way from the get-go. You need to start by just talking as your normal self. Okay. I personally would recommend that you leave a lot of the editing to, people you can rely on. I know a lot of high schools, they have teachers who are willing to assist you with, looking through your papers. You could turn to friends. I mean, it might seem strange, but, friends could give you some feedback. Like they could call you out if they feel like you're lying, or they might ask more probing questions like, oh, I didn't know that about you. And it could lead to some great discussions that give you some great material to add to your personal statement, right? Um, so, you know, all these things considered, like just again, just write like you speak, be comfortable in your own skin, and just present yourself as you are. Okay. All right. Once you have that, you have all of the building blocks to now figure out what to do with the personal statement. Okay. If you don't know, right, common essay, UC applications, just college applications in general, they ask a lot of different questions. And you could strategize about how you want to answer each of those questions. But once you have a draft of all the many things that you could be talking about and the things that you really want to make sure is included in your application, then you can start strategizing at that point about what story or what essay or what topic fits best and in what combination, right? You want to try to get at least all the different elements. You don't want to, and essentially, you don't want to repeat yourself in any of these essays. You want each essay to present some new information about you or present yourself in a different light, right? Because that's how people are. People are multifaceted. They have a range of experiences. It's not just one thing. And so, each essay should kind of touch on something different, right? It might all be connected to the same thing, like your overall goal for college and what you want to do with it. But you do want to start now thinking about how do I get all of these different things I want to talk about? How do I get it into all of these different essay topics, right? How do I pick and choose, so that I have the right combination so that I could talk about everything I want to talk about, but they're responding to the specific questions in front of me. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, what this means is that you need to be very careful with some of the advice that I see thrown out there, right? I mean, I'm not doubting that a lot of people have a good understanding of how to write a personal statement because they might have read through, thousands of personal statements. But, you know, I want you to be careful because one, I know that sometimes people are following like trends and things like that. If unless they're actually part of admission committees, then they honestly are guessing why a student got into a college or not, right? And there's a lot of luck involved in whether or not you get into a particular college. So if a student gets into a college, you can't assume it's because of the personal statement. You also don't know how much of the personal statement played a role in it, unless they explicitly tell you it was because of the personal statement. Okay. So a lot of people are doing guesswork about the personal statement. So you need to be very careful when you receive feedback or advice about how to write a personal statement when it comes to the particular topic or what you talk about, because the truth is people are just guessing. Okay. My experience, and when I reflect upon, what I consider to be a solid personal statement versus not, again, it's not about the specific topic, right? So, like, here, let me give you an example, right? One of the things that in the Asian community, they're told not to put in their personal statement is don't talk about the immigrant experience, right? Don't talk about your immigrant. And then the explanation that they're given is, oh, it's because there's so many people who write about their immigrant experience. And so, you know, like they get bored of it and they don't want to hear it because it's like the same story again and again and again. Okay, fine. All right. But my guess, and this is just a hunch, right? Based off of the range of different types of immigrant experience essays I've read, is that very few students actually write a good personal statement talking about their immigrant experience, right? Because honestly, sometimes it just doesn't sound personal. And one of the ways it doesn't sound personal is if they spend a lot of time talking about their parents and the sacrifice of their parents or their grandparents or their caregivers, the sacrifices that other people have made, right? Those stories will not be very good personal statements. But why is that? It's not because they're talking about their immigrant experience. It's actually because they're not talking about themselves. If you spend the whole time talking about the immigrant experience, but where half of the information is really about what your parents or your caregivers went through, that doesn't say anything about you, right? That doesn't say anything about you. And if you say that you're doing it because you feel obligated to do well, that also doesn't say much about you other than that you have a strong sense of duty to parents or to your caregivers, right? So again, like when you hear this kind of advice, like do this or don't that, these do's and don't lists, I think they're very misleading because it's not necessarily what you should or shouldn't do in terms of the specific content you should include in your personal statement. Rather, it's how you present that information. I have actually seen immigrant stories that are profound, like really moving, and ones that really present a person in a great light where they focus on things like um, specific kinds of, like I was sorry, I'm thinking of one specific example where a student talked about their experience in ESL, right? And how they were put into ESL when they knew that they had the ability to read really well. So they were facing some kind of a discrimination because they just assumed because they were an immigrant, oh, they couldn't speak English very well. And so they had to be put in a program where they didn't get the same opportunities to advance and to get teaching and to be challenged when it comes to read. So they had to challenge themselves, right? And this motivated them to better understand how, perception often guides people's opportunities and experiences and talks connects that up with other things that they've wanted to do or have done. Um, that there's like a continuous story of those experiences and how to let them to the things that they want to accomplish in college, right? Like that was actually a very, very good story. The way it was written sounded very personal. It sounded real. It sounded like a real person talking about their experience, right? And essentially that was an aspect of the immigration story. Okay. So again, take these advice with a grain of salt, but I mean, more specifically, I would hope that you see the bigger picture because the bigger picture is what matters, right? Like I said before, right? Your story is your story, and it's your story that actually needs to get out there, that needs to be on paper in a personal statement. But your story is not going to be put on paper if you're constantly censoring yourself with these do's and don'ts of I should talk about this and I shouldn't talk about that. No, fuck that. Talk about whatever actually matters to you, right? And this is why when you see some of these great, examples of great personal statements, one of the things you'll find that they all have in common, they don't necessarily have commonality when it comes to things like is it humorous, is it dramatic, what's the writing style like. They all vary, but the one thing they all have in common is that it's real, it's authentic, right? I could nowadays, today, right? I could probably, if I was applying to college, I would probably write one of the essays I would probably write on would be my passion for Legos. Now, you might think this sounds absolutely crazy, but I really, really care about Legos, right? Legos bring me joy. I get angry when people try to compare Legos to things like Mega Bloks. Mega Bloks is just garbage, right? People should throw that stuff in the trash, all right? Legos is the only way to go. I love Legos and I can talk about it for hours and hours. That's something I'm really passionate about, right? There's no rule that says I can't talk about it. But the reason that it's going to come off well, and I know it's going to come off well, is because it's real. I actually feel this way about Legos. So the more you fake it, the more it's going to show in your writing, right? So the first things first, get to know yourself, know what's real. We people just in general often lie to themselves. I have lied to myself for decades. I still probably lie to myself about some things, right? Because it's not always pretty to look in the mirror and to be honest with yourself, right? But the benefit of actually knowing yourself is then that when you talk and speak authentically, it will feel authentic because it is. There's no faking realness. There just isn't. And it'll show in your papers unless you are a master, like, unless you're a sociopath, I think, right? Master manipulator, like you're going to have a really hard time, at least in writing, being able to present yourself as something different than who you really are. But in order to really be able to do that, you need to start accepting the realities of who you are. Okay. Don't censor yourself, put it all on paper, speak authentically, and then let editors give you guidelines for, an insight into why talking about certain things or in certain ways might not necessarily be the best thing to do. Okay. I will tell you this, when I wrote my college application essay, I wrote specifically about my experience being a pastor's kid and the horror of knowing that people knew things about you even though you didn't know them, right? And that you felt like a kind of fish in a fishbowl, right? That kind of experience, where you're constantly being looked at. I imagine this is a common experience with anybody in the public eye because of, family members or people that they know or they're close to. They're being in the public eye and being judged by a bunch of strangers. Nowadays, I guess it happens a lot in social media as well, right? But that was a real experience, a real difficulty for me, something that I've often struggled with. And I included that in the essay. And I remember writing a couple of times, right? How other people would seem, sometimes whisper and, and there would be rumors about me and how sometimes the insults were things like this kid is like the spawn of the devil. And I was blamed for things that I didn't do. Right. I used that term spawn of the devil twice in my essay. And my English teacher said, once I think is enough. Right. A second time, and now it sounds like you're really harping on it. And this is starting to sound like this is more other issues going on that you need to kind of address personally. Right. So that was really helpful feedback, right? Because, somebody else saw something, right? Like I was speaking authentically, just writing as I would, talk to a friend about whatever what I was going through. And it was somebody else who was reading my essay that was able to kind of pick up on, I get what you're going for. I don't want to lose it. I want to keep it in there. I think it's important, but once is enough, right? That kind of feedback was extremely helpful. Okay. So leave it up to the editors to go ahead and give you that sort of feedback. In your first and in your second draft, I would highly recommend that the bigger issue is keeping the reader's attention because they don't have a lot of time to read your essay. In order to keep their attention, you're going to have to be real. You're going to have to really be real. Okay. So learn to be vulnerable, learn to talk about it, practice with friends, with family, with people that you trust, get better at it, and do that before you even start thinking about writing a personal statement. Okay. I hope that it's an eye-opening experience for you. I hope that you have people that you can trust, that you can lean on. I know that that is not an option for a lot of students, which is why I wanted to create this space where you could come ask me questions and I could give you some feedback, or you can talk about your experiences and I could help you kind of make sense of it in a way that would be more suitable for presenting on a personal statement, right? But I really do hope that at some point in your life, you do have people you can trust and lean on, people you're close enough to that you can be vulnerable in this way. Because it is through that vulnerability that you're going to find a lot of strength. You're going to find the strength to be yourself more than anything. And once you do that, you're going to open up a lot of doors for yourself. Because one, people who are reading your essay are going to see you for who you really are. And two, it's going to give them a better sense of why you fit in with their community, right? Because it's not because of all the things that you try to present yourself to be, but it's because of who you really are. And there's nothing more beautiful than being accepted, whether it's to a university, to a job, or with friends, family, and other loved ones, because you're loved for just being yourself. I'll see you next time.